In 1982, a movie terrified audiences around the world. Poltergeist became an instant horror classic, a story about a suburban family haunted by something unseen. But after the cameras stopped rolling, something far more disturbing began to happen. Cast members started dying, young actors, sudden illnesses, violent tragedies, and then the rumors began. Whispers that the set itself had been cursed, that real human skeletons had been used during filming, that something had followed the cast home. At first, Hollywood laughed it off as superstition, just another horror myth. But as the years passed and the deaths kept coming, even skeptics started to wonder. Because sometimes, the scariest part of a horror movie isn't what's on the screen. It's what happens after the credits roll. When Poltergeist hit theaters in 1982, it didn't just scare audiences, it changed horror forever. The film was directed by Tobe Hooper and produced by Steven Spielberg at the height of his creative power. It blended Spielberg's suburban innocence with Hooper's darker edge, creating something that felt disturbingly real. The story was simple: a normal family, a normal home, and then something begins to invade their lives. Not in a castle, not in a graveyard, but in a quiet, middle-class neighborhood that looked just like the one many viewers lived in. That familiarity is what made it terrifying, because it suggested something deeply uncomfortable. Evil doesn't always live in the shadows. Sometimes it lives next door. Audiences were captivated, terrified, obsessed. Lines wrapped around theaters. Critics praised it. Families whispered about it long after leaving the cinema. But no one walking out of those theaters in 1982 could have imagined that the real story of Poltergeist was only just beginning. Because what followed wasn't fiction. There were no scripts, no retakes, no director yelling cut. Just real people and real tragedy. The first death came so quickly that almost no one connected it to the film. Dominique Dunne, the young actress who played Dana Freeling, had just begun to experience life after sudden fame. She was only 22, bright, talented, just starting her career. In November of 1982, only months after the film's release, Dunne was strangled by her ex-boyfriend outside her Los Angeles home. The attack was brutal, public, unthinkable. Hollywood was shaken, but not suspicious. Tragedy happens. Violence exists. And at the time, it was seen as nothing more than a horrifying, isolated crime. But in hindsight, many would later look back and say something chilling. That was the beginning. Because what made Dunne's death unsettling wasn't just how violent it was was how close it was to the film's release. The movie had barely finished its theatrical run. The cast was still doing interviews. The story was still fresh in the public's mind. And now, one of its young stars was gone. Still, the world moved on. It had to. No one wanted to believe that something darker could be tied to a movie. Not yet. Then came the child at the center of it all. If there was one face audiences associated with Poltergeist, it was Heather O'Rourke. She wasn't just a character. She was the soul of the film. The tiny blonde girl with wide eyes and a soft voice who delivered one of the most iconic lines in horror history. "They're here." That single moment cemented her place in pop culture forever. She became the emotional anchor of the entire franchise. Viewers didn't just fear for her character, they cared about her. That's what made what happened next so deeply unsettling. As the sequels began production, Heather's fame skyrocketed. Interviews, appearances, magazine covers. But behind the scenes, something wasn't right. During filming, Heather began experiencing strange health issues, severe stomach pain, swelling, fatigue. Doctors believed it was Crohn's disease, a chronic but manageable condition. Her family trusted the diagnosis, the studio trusted the diagnosis, and the public never knew anything was wrong. Because when the cameras rolled, Heather smiled. She performed. She delivered. No one watching her on screen could have guessed something was quietly going wrong. For years, life seemed to continue normally. She kept acting, kept growing up in front of the world. But in early 1988, everything suddenly changed. Heather became violently ill. What doctors had believed was Crohn's disease turned out to be something far worse, a congenital intestinal abnormality that had been misdiagnosed for years. By the time the truth was discovered, it was too late. Heather O'Rourke died at just 12 years old after suffering septic shock caused by a bowel obstruction. The news hit like a thunderclap. Fans were stunned. Parents were horrified. The little girl who had defined the series, gone. And now, 2 young actors connected to the same film were dead. That's when something shifted. Quietly at first, then louder. A word began spreading through tabloids, horror forums, and late-night conversations: curse. Around this same time, another disturbing detail resurfaced, something that would permanently change how people viewed the film. It centered on one of the most famous scenes in Poltergeist, the swimming pool sequence. In the scene, actress JoBeth Williams falls into a muddy excavation pit filled with skeletons as a supernatural storm rages around her. For years, audiences assumed the skeletons were props, Hollywood magic, rubber replicas. That's what everyone believed. Until Williams revealed something deeply unsettling. They weren't props, they were real. According to multiple accounts from cast and crew, real human skeletons were used during filming because they were cheaper than custom-made models. At the time, medical skeletons were often purchased for educational purposes, and in rare cases, film productions used them for realism. From a production standpoint, it made financial sense. But culturally, spiritually, psychologically, it felt wrong. Because suddenly, the story wasn't just about tragedy. It was about boundaries, about the idea that the production may have crossed a line no one fully understood. In horror folklore, lines matter, rituals matter, respect for the dead matters. And once audiences learned real human remains had been used in a movie about restless spirits, the idea of a curse didn't feel so ridiculous anymore. As the years went on, the pattern continued to grow. Julian Beck, who played the skeletal, hollow-voiced preacher Cain in Poltergeist 2, died of stomach cancer not long after filming. His performance had already unsettled audiences, but knowing he was terminally ill during production added an eerie layer to his on-screen presence. Then came Will Sampson, another cast member from the sequel. Sampson had reportedly been deeply uneasy about the production and even performed a real spiritual cleansing on set. Months later, he died, following complications from a heart-lung transplant. Individually, each death had a logical explanation: illness, violence, medical tragedy. But taken together, they formed something far more powerful than logic: a pattern. And humans are wired to fear patterns we can't explain, especially when they cluster around something already designed to terrify us. By the late 1980s, the idea of the Poltergeist Curse had taken on a life of its own. Tabloids ran wild with it. Horror magazines dissected every death. Television specials explored the mystery in dimly lit studios with ominous music. Even people within Hollywood began speaking more cautiously about the film. Some crew members reportedly refused to revisit the production. Others avoided discussing it entirely, not because they believed in curses, but because something about the story fell off. And that's the strange thing about curses. They don't need universal belief to exist. They live in uncertainty, in unanswered questions, in the quiet space between coincidence and something darker. Psychologists have long studied why humans are drawn to cursed narratives. When tragedy strikes repeatedly in a connected space, the human brain begins searching for meaning. Randomness feels unbearable, so we build patterns, we connect dots, we assign intention to chaos, and horror intensifies that instinct. Because when a story already primes us to believe in unseen forces, reality starts to feel less stable. That's what happened with Poltergeist. The film blurred fiction and reality in a way few movies ever had. It didn't just tell a ghost story. It made the supernatural feel domestic, personal, possible. So when real tragedies began stacking up around it, the boundary between story and life began to erode. Decades later, the Poltergeist Curse still lingers in the cultural imagination. New generations discover the films and inevitably fall into the same spiral. They watch the movie, they read about the deaths, they learn about the skeletons, and then they ask the same question audiences have been asking for over 40 years. Was it all coincidence, or was something else at work? Skeptics argue the answer is simple. Hollywood is a massive industry. Thousands of actors, thousands of productions. Statistically, tragedies are inevitable. When you isolate one film and connect unrelated deaths, it creates the illusion of a curse where none exists. It's a logical argument, a rational one. But logic doesn't erase emotion, and it doesn't erase the strange weight that clings to this story. Because even today, when people revisit Poltergeist, there's a subtle shift in how it feels. The film hasn't changed, the scenes are the same, the dialogue is the same, but the knowledge behind it changes the experience. When Heather appears on screen, smiling into the glow of a television, viewers now watch with a different awareness. A quiet sadness, a lingering discomfort, the kind that only comes when fiction and reality overlap in ways we can't fully process. And maybe that's why the legend refuses to die. Because the Poltergeist Curse isn't just about deaths. It's about the fear that some stories leave a mark, that certain moments in time carry an energy that lingers long after the cameras stop rolling. Not supernatural in a cinematic sense, but something quieter, something harder to define. Maybe there was no curse. Maybe it was coincidence stacked on coincidence, shaped into a legend by time and storytelling. Or maybe some stories become haunted not by ghosts, but by memory, by loss, by the uncomfortable realization that horror doesn't always stay on screen. Because sometimes the scariest stories aren't the ones we invent. They're the ones that blur the line between fiction and reality. And maybe that's why, even now, more than 40 years later, people still whisper about the Poltergeist Curse. Not because they're certain it was real, but because deep down, they're not entirely sure it wasn't. So what do you think? Was the Poltergeist Curse just a string of tragic coincidences, or is this one of those stories that never fully lets go? Let me know your theory in the comments. And if you're drawn to the darker side of real history, the unexplained cases, and the stories that still don't sit right, make sure you're subscribed, because some mysteries don't end when the story is over. They stay with you. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.